Look at all these mock toes. This is like $3,000 worth of mock toes, and that's not even all the stuff we reviewed this year for the Mocktober series, because we always do Mocktober, October, mock toes, Mocktober. This is like, I think the 5th year we've done it. And it wasn't until this year that I fully understood what even a mock toe is, the moccasin story, where it came from, how it slowly transformed from this Native American style footwear that existed on this continent for 500 years and slowly fused with the European boot making to make one of the most unique styles of footwear of all time, true moccasin style footwear. And this year, we really focus on the Moccasin stuff, made in the United States of America, because it's the most true American footwear that there is, because it predates the United States. And these true moccasins over the last 100 years have slowly died out and been replaced with the fake moccasin toe, like you see with the Thoroughgoods, the Red Wings. Basically, any common mock toe you see is not a true moccasin. And there's some very key features that make these so unique, like the way it wraps underneath your foot, the different styles of mock toe stitch, the back stitch here, the way it wraps underneath your foot. And these are very different price points, anywhere from $140 all the way up to $1,000. And so in this video, after we've cut all of them in half, we're gonna go through every layer that matters most, not just to see which is the best moccasin, because they're vastly different price points, but to see what qualities, what features, what attributes you can actually get per price point in these various moccasins that are true American-made mocs. Except for this one. This one's made in Canada, and the Canadians did not appreciate the 51st state joke. My bad. My bad, Canada. And you also have the ultimate guide to, if you don't want one of these specific brands, and there's other brands out there that you want, you can use this as your ruler to say, is this worth the price? Does it have this feature? Does it have this? Because that's what I'm looking for. These are not fun to record on for hours and hours at a time. I'm always in meetings, I'm recording, I'm doing this, and I'm in bad posture. It wrecks my lower back. And when you're in a cheap chair, it just beats you up. Versus this Flexispot, the amount of articulation on this is ridiculous. But you can adjust it to arms, you can adjust the height, and then you have your locking for your back. But the thing I really, really like about this is that right there. A little bit of lumbar goes a long way. That's why when Flexispot reached out and said they have their new C7 Morpher ergonomic chair, I was like, please send me one. I need one. But the new C7 Morpher is loaded with features designed to actually support you and not fight you like all the other cheap chairs we've had for like 10 years. It has the 3D adjustable headrest that tilts to your perfect angle, and their Flex Lean tech wraps your upper back and moves with you, keeping your shoulders relaxed all day. The one thing I'm excited about most is the lumbar, because they have the air lumbar system that lets you literally inflate and fine tune your lower back support exactly how you want. And the hybrid mesh seat cushion is super breathable, reduces hip pressure. It's more comfortable than foam. It doesn't get the heat retention as much as foam, and it actually like shifts to your body because it's that hybrid mesh. And one feature this doesn't have is their 5D armrest, where you can adjust it 1,000 different ways. And the cool thing is, you know, these chairs are not cheap. You can go to Walmart and get a really cheap chair, but they're not gonna come with the Flexispot that gives you 30-day risk-free trial and a 10-year warranty. And for Black Friday, they're offering up to 60% off site-wide, plus an extra $30 off the C7 Max with the code C730. So you can check out at flexispot.com/deals. Your back will thank you. I promise you, we use them in the shop every day. So check them out below, and thanks again to Flexispot for sponsoring this video. Starting with the most affordable, we have the brand is Leather Moccasin Co. That's the men's ankle moccasin boot, or the Su Tai. They retail for the most affordable at $139. They're very light at 12.5 ounces. They're made in Canada, close enough, sorry Canadians. And this really was the most simple, the most true moccasin-like in terms of not having a big grippy outsole, not a lot of material underneath your foot, but we also saw some issues that I think could probably be fixed pretty easily, like that little hole there. And other than that, it's a really cool little moccasin for 140 bucks. Next most affordable is the Foot Skin. The style is a men's walking boot. They retail for $227. They weigh 1 pound 4 ounces, and these are made in the United States. And this boot was really unique because it's more like a boot than these, but it's not so boot-like that it actually feels like a boot. It feels a lot more like a sneaker because there's very little structure on the inside. But as for flaws, I didn't love how they glued the insole in. The leather's a little heavily finished, but honestly, for the most part, for 230 bucks, it's not bad. Next up is one of the heavy hitters in the industry, Rancourt. So this is their Belgrade camp loafer. And if you don't know what a camp moc is or a camp loafer, I had no idea until I did this video, and it ended up being really, really interesting. It has a cool backstory and a history about it, so go watch this video if you haven't seen it. And these retailed for $318. They weighed 1 pound 6 ounces, and these are made in basically the moccasin capital of the United States, Maine, USA. And Rancourt's one of the top brands, not just in these loafer styles. This little tag from boot camp a couple years ago. But they also make these boots, and they're built basically the same way. And that's what's cool about Rancourt, is they really specialize in these really finely made, really traditional hand-sewn moccasins. But they also do these taller boots, and as you can see, they're basically built the exact same. And for flaws, there really wasn't a lot to point to, because I just love this shoe. I love the lactated sole. I liked how soft and squishy it was, but it's still grippy, so you can actually use it as a camp mock. I love the bison leather, and so not a lot of complaints with Rancourt. Next up was Gokey. So this is a really popular brand that nobody really covered on the internet. Nobody really knew what was on the inside. They don't know how they were built. And these are centered more around like the hunting style Mocs, the outdoor adventurer Mocs. So the brand is Gokey. The style is the Simba Safari. They retail for 440 bucks. They weigh 1 pound 3 ounces. They're made in the USA. And Gokeys were really nice because they're a lot more affordable than some of these other Mocs we're about to talk about, but they still have a lot of the features. You know, maybe the biggest complaint that I had and other people had was this tuck board. You know, it was a little bit sloppy here and there. It was a little off center on this one side. You know, it completely missed the stitch there. But for a somewhat affordable hunting moccasin, I really liked it. Then we start getting to the heavy hitters. This is Easy Moc. So these are starting to get to that upper echelon of prices near the Pacific Northwest, the top tier brands. So this brand is Easy Moc. The style is the Rangeley, not Wrangley. I did the whole video completely wrong. Sorry, Easy Moc. I called like one of their coolest shoes the wrong name for 20 minutes. Sorry, Rangeley. The price is $655. These are a little bit heavier at 2 pounds 1 ounce. And you can see why they're heavier. You know, you compare them to like the foot skins, you compare them to these little bit lighter Mocs, even the Gokeys. These are really substantially built, big, chunky, you know, and as for flaws or things I didn't love, once you get to this upper echelon, there's not a whole lot to complain about. And some of the feedback we got from this video in the comment section was like, oh, what about the heels? It's not full leather heel stack, but it's still nailed on. So honestly, a pretty awesome little boot. There is one thing right here. We'll go over this in a bit, but this doesn't technically wrap all the way underneath. We'll cover that in a sec. Then to one of the top dogs in the industry, and the one that we've really covered a ton, Russell moccasins. And this is the one we covered in the series. This is the collaboration we did with them, the Moc Daddy, the OG Moc. But it's essentially their backcountry, but with the wedge sole on it, a few minor adjustments. But the price of the backcountry is $850. They weigh just under 2 pounds. They're made in Berlin, Wisconsin, USA. And I'm pretty sure the collaboration sold out. And so we'll focus on both, but don't get after me. It's not a full shameless plug. But you can see like this is in that upper echelon. It's 850 bucks is not cheap. You know, you can compare it to like the Pacific Northwest brands, like the high-end like Freibergs, John Lofgrens. You're starting to get up in that territory. And it's not the most expensive one either. Because the most expensive Moc we reviewed is one of the brands that has the most mystique in all the moccasins, the Yucatans. So the brand is obviously Yucatan. The style is the 8 Pigtails Chukka. They retail for $990. And they weigh 1 pound 8 ounces, and they're made in the USA. And the thing that Yucatan does really well is blending the old style of construction techniques, the aesthetic, but elevating it to a more modern way, all while being really, really well built. So that's all of the contenders. Now let's start actually looking at the materials used. And we're gonna go pretty quick through the materials because what matters most to me is like, what is the mock toe stitch? Does it wrap all the way underneath? Like the most important things are the unique aspects to true Mocs constructions. But the other materials matter. And in terms of leather, the leather type will help you understand what the intended use of the boots are. The more oily, the more saturated, the more outdoors ready it's gonna be. Drier, the more plasticky looking, the more casual and cheap it's gonna be. And the drier and more fancy the leather looks, the more fancy the application probably is. And so that's a good indicator when you're trying to decide what the intended use of this moccasin is. Is it worth the price? Is it the type of mock I'm looking for? So looking at the most affordable again, the foot skins, they have actually a really thick leather. It's 2.5 millimeters thick. It has a light finish on top. It's more pigment than plastic. But I was surprised because the next one up, the foot skins, is only 1.5 millimeters thick. It's double layered, so it ends up being 3 millimeters, but it's essentially the lining. One of my favorite leathers is this bison leather, and that's what Rancourt really does unique, is they blend that refined look that they have with some really rugged leathers and rugged outsoles. And this leather is no different. This is a really nice piece of bison leather, 2.5 millimeters thick. You see all the pebbling, all that really unique character. And this is a step up in quality of leather. You know, both of these are pretty cheap leathers. You got that heavy pigment on top. They're not the most oiled and saturated. They're a little dry and foamy, but they're also really affordable. Whereas the Rancourt's very expensive and you get a very nice leather. And even though the Gokeys are more expensive, and their leather is still good. It's not quite as good as Rancourt. Part of that's because it's a smaller loafer compared to a boot. And this leather's still good, but it's more similar to these drier leathers. It comes in at 2 millimeters thick, so about what you want for an outdoorsy boot. Usually work boots you see 2 to even 3.5 are the most extreme, so it's still within that price or that thickness range. It has a nice heavy canvas. It's almost 1 millimeter thick. And that's what makes this unique amongst the other boots. You know, like Russell has some canvas side stuff. The Easy Moc has some stuff like that. But that's a big part of the reason why people like Gokeys, because they are really light, they're affordable. They're not the most premium dress leathers that are tanned by a Horween, they're function based. And so for the price point, it works really well. The Easy Mocs, on the other hand, that's where you start to see that step up, because this is CF Stead's Rambler leather. And this leather is more of those fine leathers. You know, it's still very rugged, and it's intentionally made to be rugged, but CF Stead is known for making nice, high quality, rugged leathers. You know, it's not Sidewall leather that's made for the toughest boots in the world. It's not Horween leather, it's really fancy leather. It's this unique spot where an English tannery that makes really fine leathers that can be really rugged. And because of that, they are pretty expensive leather compared to like what the Gokeys use. And the leather's still plenty thick, 2.5 millimeters thick. And I just love this leather. I think it's so beautiful. I love the character of it. I love that it kind of looks already worn in by the time you first get it. And some people don't like that. I hate brand new looking products. It's like almost embarrassing to me to have a brand new product. So I love some like really rugged looking leather. Then to the Russell leather, and this is probably the most true moccasin leather out of the bunch, because moccasins are really tough to make because you take that 2D flat sheet and you wrap it around the toe to make a 3-dimensional shape. And when you use really dry leathers, when you use really thick leathers, it can be really hard to get that seamless toe. And even just for the people that actually hand lasting these, which we'll go over in a bit, the difference between a hand lasted and a hand sewn mock toe, which is bigger difference between all these. But you need this kind of leather that's really soft, it's supple, has a lot of oils in it, because that's good for the longevity and the durability of an outdoorsy boot, but it also makes it a lot easier to manufacture these boots. And so this is the most true moccasin leather out of all of the boots. And this is their walnut timber jacket. It's 2.5 millimeters thick, and this is some good leather. I really like this leather. And you compare it to the Gokeys. The Gokeys are a similar concept of leather. It's oily, it's soft, it's this, but the Russell is just a step up in quality of leather. But at the same time, it's nearly twice the price. Then finally, to the most expensive one, the Yucatan. So this is a Horween leather. So that is that top end brand that's really well known for making really saturated chrome tanned leathers that have a really nice sheen to them. And this isn't a Chrome XL, it's their full grain flesh out leather, but it is thick. It's 3 millimeters thick, but it's still really soft and supple. It's a really good boot leather, and it's a really good leather. It's just not near as oily and saturated as some of these other leathers. You're not gonna go hunting in these for sure, but you can easily go hunting in these. So if I were to rank these from best leather to worst leather, including the application that they're used for, starting at worst, it's probably footskin. It's just not great. Then to our Canadians, then probably up to Gokeys. These top boots is tough. That's why I think it's important to roll in the function of the leather for the boot. I think I would put the Rangeleys next. And then probably here with the Yucatans, I just love the bison leather. And so I'd probably put Russell here and the bison leather next, because it still works as a really good moccasin leather. It's still really saturated, it's still really oily, it's a little bit thicker, it has all those pre-broken in break points into it. So you could swap these, but I just really like this Rancourt leather. But what about the lining? Well, we already talked about the leather moccasins not having a lining. With the footskins, like we talked about, it's the same outside leather, just flipped to the inside, so it's 1.5 millimeters thick with that overall thickness of 3, so not bad. And then the Rancourt's very minimally lined, and it's just lined with the bison leather. If you look at their actual boot, same story. They're very minimal, very unlined, and I like that. You know, it's for the application of a loafer. I really like the breathability. I like the simplicity. Even with this is not a hunting boot. It's a dressier version of a moccasin boot. Some people are not going to like it because you got all these fuzzies that are going to get on your sock. It's a little more grippy when you're wearing them, but I like the simplicity. And then if you look at the Gokeys, completely unlined, no dedicated liner anywhere on these, which once again I like. Keeps it light, keeps it breathable, keeps it flexible, but it just does not make it very water resistant. For instance, the Easy Mocs, you can see this is fully lined with this nice, soft, supple. It looks like deerskin. I'm not for sure if it is or not. It's 1 millimeter thick. And this is a really nice lining leather, way better than the footskins. And other than that, so far that's the only lined one. Because if you look at the Russells, it's lined, but it's lined in a different way because it's a different function. This lining on the Easy Moc is all about comfort, adding that easy in, easy out, so you don't have all that fuzzy on the inside. The Russells are a lot more of a dedicated function boot. And so this lining is their waterproof lining. I think it's silicone infused, and so the water doesn't want to permeate through it. And you can see here at the toe where a lot of moccasins leak, it's completely seamless up through here, so there's nowhere for that to get in. Technically, you could kind of say it's gonna sneak in through these threads or whatever, but for the most part, it's very watertight while still being partially lined. And that's one of the big differences, not just between the functionality of these two more hunting boots, but also between this boot that looks like you could go hunting in it. Even down to the differences of the tongue gusset. You know, the Russells are gusseted all the way up, the Easy Mocs aren't, the Gokeys are fully gusseted. And so that's where you're gonna start seeing some signs of the intended use of these. If you don't have a fully gusseted tongue, it's probably not for an outdoor use. If you see a gusseted tongue, it's probably leaning more towards that direction. And then if you looked at the Yucatans, this one is also fully lined with that deerskin style leather. But what was interesting about this, it's not really tied in anywhere. You know, it's not sewn in, it's not seamless like we saw with the Russells. And once again, this is not a hunting boot, it's not for the outdoors, it's a lot more of a casual shoe, which is totally fine with me when it comes to the durability. But, you know, if it does start to delaminate, that could be a potential fail point. And the Yucatans are fully lined underneath your foot. The only other one that's like that is the Russells. And before we get to the most important stuff, let's look at the midsoles and outsoles, because these leather moccasins, like I said, these are the most true moccasin because all you have is a little bit of a felt midsole, and then you've got this crepe rubber outsole. It's really thin. And you know, it's not gonna be the most durable thing, and you're also not gonna get a lot of ground protection. You're gonna have a lot more ground feel. So if you step on a rock weird, you know, you're gonna feel it. And so obviously the more light and flexible and more moccasin-like they're gonna be, the lighter the intended use. And then obviously the bigger and the chunkier, the more heavy the application. Because if you look at the foot skins, you might, oh, this is a boot, it's got a heel, it's got this, it's got that. But in all reality, there's really no midsole to it, which is not that crazy in a moccasin. But the outsole basically acts as the midsole because it's a soft, squishy, blown rubber outsole. And it does have a heel, but not a shank. And so once again, it looks more rugged, but when you actually look close to the details, it's a more casual outsole, especially with not having a shank. And an easy way you can tell if the boot doesn't have a shank, and you might not want to do this in front of the salesperson at wherever place you're buying shoes, give it a little bend like that. If it has a steel shank in there, it's not going to bend like that. If you hear a crack, run out the door. You broke the boot and you should probably buy it. Be light with it. Don't just snap the shank and get me in trouble. But that's the point, right? Like these are kind of supposed to be flexible and malleable and have a lot more of a natural feel underfoot. So if you look at basically the next step up with the Rancourts, these do have a shank. Even their boot has a shank. And so it's a completely different concept because instead of just a soft, squishy outsole, which these both have, they also have that full-length leather midsole. So it's gonna give you a lot more rigidity than this because that leather's a little stiffer, it's a little bit hardier, but you still have a lot of flexibility. You still have a lot of the value of a flexible moccasin with the protection of a big slab of leather and that stability, and it's gonna break in the shape of your foot. And you're gonna see, as we step up in price, you're also gonna see a step up in quality of materials. These hard midsoles, these durable midsoles, because if you look at the Gokeys, even though these are really light and flexible, you still have that full-length veg tan midsole. And a lot of people from the outside, they're like, oh, it's a Goodyear Welt construction. And so don't get fooled by that because it's really hard sometimes to tell the difference between a true moccasin and a fake moccasin because a Goodyear Welt still has that very similar look. And so one foolproof way is to lightly pull the upper way, and if you see a Blake stitch going down, it's more than likely a true moccasin. But the easiest way to tell is just to look inside the boot, and if you see that seamless sidewall and you see that Blake stitch, then it's more than likely a true moccasin. And as you can see, like this is very similar to the foot skins because it's got that soft squishy outsole, but it has that veg tan midsole and a steel shank on the inside. And once again, in the Easy Mocs, you still see, actually you get a double midsole. You get that leather midsole and a rubber midsole, and you have that big, chunky, basically like firefighting outsole on a moccasin boot, which is very similar to the Russells because you've got the Vibram outsole, the rubber midsole, the leather midsole, with the main difference being just the outsole being a unit outsole on the Russells and this being two separate pieces. But you can see that clear trend that I was talking about. And then always the outlier is the Yucatan, but even the Yucatan built the exact same way. You got that veg tan insole, that rubber midsole, and then the outsole. This is a soft, squishy Vibram outsole. And the reason that all three of these have a rubber midsole and a leather midsole is you get all the support of the leather that compresses. It's going to last a really long time, but leather does not glue well to rubber. So they sew on that rubber midsole and then glue that down to the outsole. So you can see how some of this, they took the old school style construction and really had to figure out how to get that outsole on there and get the durability, get everything that they were looking for, the more European style, with still keeping all the comfort of a moccasin. So once again, if you're looking for quality, just look at this cross section on the sole. If you see all these layers, you see that veg tan, there's a good chance it's a high quality moccasin. And now to the most important stuff. You know, everything else you can kind of judge other boots in a similar way, the midsoles, the leathers, you know, it's very standard information for the boot world. But the confusing stuff, the hardest stuff, is all the stuff that's hidden on the inside, the stuff that's true to a moccasin, like the construction. Because if you look at every single one of these boots, if you look inside, you can see that Blake stitch on the inside. With the foot skins, with the leather moccasins, with the Russells. Actually, the Russells, you can't see it. Now that I'm actually looking at it, because that lining is a different lasting process, which is different, right? So like both these boots are lined, but they're lined in a different way. Because on the Easy Mocs, you can see that Blake stitch, but the Russells you can't. But we know it's Blake stitch because I can see it right there. And that's because the Easy Moc, they last the lining and the upper leather at the same time, where the Russells, because they're a lot more function-based, or a hunting boot, an adventure boot, they last them separately. So you don't have any stitching going to the inside that could bleach through with water, or even just having that comfort of not having a stitch that you're standing on. And so it's not always a hard and fast rule, but if you combine it with that other tactic of just pulling that away and seeing those threads pop straight down, there's a good chance it's a Blake stitch. Because all of these have a Blake stitch. Because how else are you gonna get a moccasin attached to an outsole? Because you can't just glue it, because if it was just glued, it's not flat on flat, it's rounded. So as over time, that would just slowly delaminate and it would fall apart immediately. So you have to have a Blake stitch on a quality moccasin. If there's no Blake stitch, it's either a really expensive Russell where they intentionally hide it, or it's a cheap moccasin or a fake moccasin. Another really important part of a moccasin is the tuck. And this will kind of go into more of like the seamless underneath your foot. But as you can see with the leather moccasins, there is no tuck. You're like, what's a tuck? Well, let me show you. If you look at all these other boots, you can see there's a layer right here underneath the insole on all of these. It's a synthetic fiberboard, like a really heavy fiberboard. And all these brands say that they don't want to use veg tan because this actually works better, and I've yet to see a brand say that veg tan is the better choice, clearly. But the reason they have a tuck is to add some structure and some rigidity to the heel, because if you want a true moccasin, you can get that. But if you're looking for that moccasin boot, you want a little rigidity. You want some support where that shank is. You want some support at your heel. And as you can see, a lot of these moccasins, they stop that true moccasin underneath your foot, right where that tuck board is. And I wonder if that's why it's called a tuck, because that's where you tuck all those extra pieces in. Because if I pull this away on the Gokeys, ooh, it was sharp. You can see the shank nests in there where this big gap is. And the gap is not there to fit the shank. The gap is to make it a lot easier to last, because making a full seamless footbed is really, really tough. It takes a long time, it takes a lot of skill, and they still have to do a little split here to get it to tuck all in together. But basically any of these boots, you're gonna see that tuck board. You look at the Easy Moc, and that's a little bit different because the lining runs all the way underneath the tuck, including this one layer of the upper. The Rancourts are the same, that leather runs all the way through the tuck. The Russells also don't run all the way underneath the tuck. It's most of the way under the tuck, but just right there at the heel, they fill that void with a little bit of cork. And there's some discussion back and forth of like, what's better? Is it full underneath the tuck? Is it better this way, that way? You know, if you really want a true moccasin, you could say like, oh, I want that insole to wrap all the way underneath the tuck as well. But I really don't think you're gonna feel or experience the difference of having that full length versus it stopping at the tuck. And that leads us to maybe the most important part of a moccasin, is that seamless sidewall. Like this is really where you get that expression, like they feel like leather socks around my feet. They conform to the shape of my feet perfectly. I've got the perfect support because it's completely seamless up the sidewall. You look at any other boot, there's gonna be the insole and then there's that sidewall and there's that hard line there. Where this leather underneath your foot is the same as it wraps up to the side of your foot. And all of these are true moccasins where they wrap up around your foot. Even though some of them stop at the tuck, they're all true moccasins. But one thing that is different on some of these is some of these have a molded sole or a second layer around your foot. And the reason they do this is it adds extra durability, it has more stability around your foot so you're not sliding around quite as much. It's on your highest wear areas. It adds a little bit of rigidity. And this molded sole is another indicator of not necessarily the quality of the boot, but the intended use of the boot. Because if you do have the second layer, it is intended for heavier use. But a lot of times brands fake it. A lot of times, especially in fake moccasins, they just add this to it to make it look more durable. So which of these that have a molded sole are a true molded sole that wraps all the way underneath your foot? Because that's important, because as you can see with the Gokeys, that is a true double layer. You get double the amount of leather underneath your foot. It compresses a little bit more, it adds more protection from the ground, and it does structure your foot a little bit more. So the Gokeys are a true molded sole. If you look at the Russells, this version doesn't have a molded sole. So I went to grab their PH, and you can see molded sole all the way through, and this one also wraps all the way underneath. And unlike the backcountries, both those layers wrap all the way underneath the foot. So even the individual brands are gonna have some things that are different from style to style, and that's why I wanted this video to be more of like an educational, now you can go out and judge moccasins on your own. And honestly, none of these are a fake double layer, but the closest one to it is the Easy Mocs. And like we talked about, looking at the gusseted tongue, looking how this is built, it's not really, even though it looks really rugged, it looks like it's made for hunting, it's not really made for really durable outdoor use. It's more to look like that, which I don't think is a bad thing, because I love this boot. I think it's super cool. It has all the same features. It's just not, those features aren't positioned towards the outdoors. And that includes that double layer of that molded sole. And you can see this little indentation here where it's not the molded sole that stops, it's the actual upper leather right here that stops. And then that molded sole wraps all the way underneath of your foot. So it still has the same functionality. It still adds a couple layers around your foot, but you don't get the full layers underneath of your foot, and you have that little bit of a lip right there. Now to probably the biggest differentiating factor in the functionality, in the quality, and even down to the price is the actual mock toe stitch. Because there's various types of mock toe stitch in how they're stitched, but also how they're manufactured. The most affordable, the fastest way to do it is like these leather moccasins where they're pre-punched and they're cut out on a machine or a die, and then all the manufacturer has to do is take that thread and sew it together, tighten it down. The next step above is pre-cut leather, but then hand-punched holes. And the difference between those is you can see there's light coming through these pre-punch holes because they're actually removing leather. It's a punch that pulls out like a millimeter round punch. Versus if you do it the hand-sewn way, you take an awl and you're piercing the leather. Instead of punching it, you're just splitting the leather with a really sharp awl so that when you tie it down, you have a lot tighter seam. And so what is the foot skin? Foot skin, it looks like it's pre-punched. You can see those perfectly round holes. You can see daylight through them. And so these are both pre-punched but hand-sewn. But you compare that to the Rancourts and you can't see any daylight through those. You can't even see the holes, and that's because these are punched with an awl. And I don't know for sure if this is machine cut and then punched by hand or if it's trimmed by hand. I'm guessing just from the consistency that they're machine cut and then hand punched and hand sewn. What about the Gokeys? You know, these are 400 bucks. Well, I can't see any daylight through them. I don't see any hole punches, so I'm pretty sure this is hand punched and hand sewn, but I'm guessing this one's also machine cut. The Easy Mocs, exact same story. And really the only one that's different is the Russell moccasins. Let me grab the back, not the back country, let me grab the PHs. Because I've noticed with the Russells, every pair is completely different. This top stitch, sometimes it's really narrow, sometimes it's really wide, and just looking at the holes, you can tell it's not punched, it's a hand sewn with the awl. But because it varies so much, I'm pretty sure that they hand trim these and hand punch them and hand sew them. So there's some of the most expensive boots, but you also get the most premium way of doing a mock toe stitch, which it does have actual functionality, because if you look at this compared to this, if you took both of these hunting, or you just took them over a nice morning walk in the dew, all that water, all that dirt and grime, it will eventually sneak its way through those big open holes. But on the other side of it, these hand sewn ones, people sometimes complain about it. It's like, I saw it on the internet and it was like this wide, but this one's way different. So you get a lot less consistency with everything being hand done, but you get a lot more watertight, you get a lot more durability, you got a lot more of sealing that away from the outside world. And it can be really hard to tell, but one foolproof way is just looking on top and see, is it actually a hole there, a perfectly round hole? Or can I not even see the hole that the thread's going through? And it does matter. And that's why it's one of those things with moccasin constructions that nobody really talks about, but it makes maybe the biggest difference from brand to brand. And really the last unique aspect to look for in a moccasin construction is this little stitch right there. And I had no idea what this stitch was until I did this series, because I've seen it faked on a lot of shoes and boots. I've seen it on like Sperry's. I thought maybe it was like a area to pry your boot off or something. I think the most obvious version of this is the Yucatans. So you see this stitch right there. When you have this whole thing filleted open, like we did in this video, you can clearly see exactly what that is for. You can see this was 2 flat pieces of leather, but there's a split in the middle, and that's because you can't just take a 2-dimensional sheet and wrap it around, because you end up with all this excess leather ribboning around to get that 2-dimensional sheet to take a 3-dimensional shape. And so the way they fix that is a lot of these brands, they'll have this split right here down the middle, and that's where that tuck covers that, and that allows this shape to take place while still cinching this around. But it's even harder at the heel because it's so much taller and there's already so much slack taken out to get that 3-dimensional shape. It's almost impossible. Even the leather moccasins have to have a split right there to bring that all together, and it didn't have a stitch there, which is crazy to me. Because that's really the only way you can do it, because as you can see, as you bring these up and around, you can't just pucker all that up like you can on the mock toe, because you do get a lot of that puckering and some of that extra ribboning taken out by the puckering of the mock toe stitch, but you can't do that at the heel. And so they split it, and these two sidewalls come in and sew down to the footbed, and that is where you get this little T-shaped stitch. So it doesn't really add any functionality. It's more just an indicator that it's closer to a true moccasin. So which ones have that stitch that's real and which ones don't? The leather moccasins don't have that stitch, but they still have a similar construction style that it should have a stitch. The foot skins do it a similar way, but instead of that little stitch there, they have this tab that wraps up and around. The Gokeys have that stitch, but you can see this backstay is a completely separate piece than the rest of this moccasin. So this one is all just for style. That's not an indicator that wraps underneath, because as you can see on the inside, the tuck covers that and there's nothing underneath it there. Ooh, I almost cut my finger on that shank. What about the Rancourts? Well, let's look at it. You can see on the inside, there's that stitch that comes together and it wraps underneath. So that one is a true stitch. The Russells don't even have that stitch. They just build it almost more like a European style boot. The Easy Mocs, they do have that stitch, and it is real because you can see that tucks up, there's that split, and then that stitch seams it all together. And obviously the Yucatans are real. But that kind of brings us to another point of this, is the counter material. Because these moccasins are really lightweight, they're flexible, they don't have a lot of structure to them, but there's various amounts of structure you can get in these boots. Because even with the Russells, you can see the Russells, this backcountry has that big slab of veg tan leather. It's really stiff, it's really hard, it's really gonna grip your heel. So if you're out in the sticks and you're side heeling and you're in one of these boots and you don't have any of the structure in the heel, your heel's constantly gonna be pushing on the outside of the boot. You're gonna be wearing your heel out, you're gonna be wearing your foot around, you're gonna get blisters on your foot from slipping around. So the more structure you have in the heel, the more heavy intended use it has. And so when you combine that with the pucker stitch, you can see basically all these that have that pucker stitch don't really have the ability to add a heavy counter on the inside. And I think that's a big part of the reason why the Russells and the Gokeys don't do it that way, because they want the ability to put a Celastic heel counter in the Gokeys, the veg tan heel counter in the Russells, and everyone else doesn't really do heel counters because you can't sandwich it in between as easily, those two stitches. And so that's another indicator. Does it have that stitch? Is it real? Then it's probably not gonna have the most supportive heel. Do I feel it has a really supportive heel? Then it's probably more intended for heavy use. So now we've covered all the important stuff of any boot, like the leather quality, the lining, the midsole, the shank, the counter, the outsole, but we also covered all the most important stuff to true moccasins, like the mock toe stitch style for water tightness, the heel stitch, is it real, is it faked, can it even have a counter on the inside, the tuck and what that means for stability, the wrapping underneath, the molded sole. You should have everything you need to know to judge these for yourself and what you want out of these, but also any other brands that we haven't covered. You should have all the info to judge them for yourself. But this video would be no fun if we didn't rank them. So let's rank these on best value to worst value, because these are tough. Value is very subjective. Here's the value equation. It's basically value equals quality over price. Basically, what do you get per dollar spent? And it will change depending on your intended use. Like if you're looking for a more hunting style moccasin, this will be a better value than these, because you will die in these. These will last like 3 miles before you're like, oh, I made a mistake. Let's start at worst value to best. Starting at worst value, might be a little surprised. I think honestly, Yucatans are probably the worst value. They're some of the highest quality boots in the entire lineup. They probably have the most true moccasin stuff. They're the most unique, really pushing the limits of this style of construction and this style of footwear. But they're almost $1,000, and you compare it to the other qualities of these and the wearability and some of these other things, and you can see how this would not be the highest value. Even though it's one of my favorites and it's really cool, per dollar spent, it's really expensive. Then for very similar reasons, I'd probably go with the Rangeley boot from Easy Moc. And Easy Moc has tons of really cool stuff that are a lot better value. Like the whole Easy Moc name comes from their little Easy Moc. They have this really pared down version of moccasin that's like super high value because it's so affordable. So we're not judging it necessarily the whole brand, but these specific boots. And you know, these are very expensive. And part of it's because they look like really rugged, like hunting boots, but they're more casual. You can still hunt them, you still take them pretty much anywhere, but they're just a different class than like the true hunting boots. Then next, I'd probably go with the foot skins. They're really affordable, but for a little bit more, you can get a really nice moccasin. And this leather's just not very good. The big punched holes, there's no shank on the inside. It's just, it's missing a lot of the magic of moccasins. And so even though it could be a good value to a lot of people, I rank it third worst value. And basically for the same reasons, I'd probably put these next. They're really affordable, and if you want to get the feel of a moccasin, it's a good first step. But like, there's just not as many good uses of this, just because it is a lot closer to a true moccasin. They probably neck rustle. You know, even though these do really well for their intended use, but they're very expensive, like 850 bucks, and you pay for what you get. These are the hand sewn, hand punched, hand trimmed. Everything is hand done. It's got all the stuff we talked about with the veg tan heel counter, all the premium materials wrapping underneath, the silicone infused. But when you're just looking at a value proposition, it's very expensive for what you get compared to the other styles of hunting boots. You know, you compare it to the other heritage boots of a similar intended use, and these are pretty pricey. But at the same time, the reason all these are expensive is because they're all very handmade. It takes a long time to make these, and you can only get these features from these hand-sewn moccasins. So really all of these, compared to regular boots or even heritage boots, they're expensive for what you get. The next ones are tough because I think I'd probably put, I don't know. I think I'd probably put Gokey next. It hits a really good spot around that $400 price point. It still has a lot of good materials, but I just feel like the Rancourt gives you more per dollar spent. And so I'm gonna go Gokey, and then probably best value per dollar spent is Rancourt. And this is very, very subjective, you know, very subjective. Our 25% off Black Friday sale is live right now. All of our boot accessories, camera gear, wallets, belts are all 25% off, and they make the absolute best gifts, so check them out below. But what about just sheer quality? Regardless of price, which one is the actual best moccasin through and through? Through somewhat of my subjective lens, I still think Russell is the king of moccasins. You know, we've collaborated with them, we've worked with them a lot, but that's why, because they have this overlap stitch that none of these boots have. All the flaws of these machine punch toes and the hand punch toes, they're fixed with this overlap stitch, because all the other moccasins, the leather comes up together and is sewn together. This one has that overlap where it wraps around and then is sewn through. So when you combine that overlap stitch with that seamless lining, they're really, really good. And there's veg tan all the way through, the veg tan heel counters, the silicone infused leather. It's got some of the best leather out of any of the moccasins. They use a lot of the premium components from Vibram. They've got one of the longest histories. So yeah, I would put Russell as number one. I think that's pretty fair. Like, regardless of price, which is the best true moccasin? Right now, I'd put Russell. And then number two, I would probably go with Easy Moc. These are really, really good. Through and through really good. They're a little less hardy than the Russells, but everything else is right on par. They even have some of the stuff like this true stitch at the heel while still using Vibram, and like the rubber midsole has really cool CF stud leather. I'd probably put Easy Moc next. Third best overall, I think you have to go with Yucatan, because if you're not thinking about price, this is really, really well built. And you could maybe even switch these for the Easy Moc if you wanted. Then I would go Rancourt, Gokey, Footskin, and leather moccasin. That's how I'd rank them. And you could completely disagree, because you might like this and like, well, I don't need a freaking hunting boot. I just want like a really cool moccasin that feels this way, that's like a unique style. Or like, I don't want a hunting boot, I want a freaking loafer. And Rancourt specializes in loafers. So that's kind of the last thing I want to talk about, is like we've identified where some of these brands really shine and what their intended uses are through the lens of their individual boots, even though they have various models. But for leather moccasins, what are these for? This is just like, it's basically a slipper. You know, they have some other styles, but they're very light. They're very like true moccasin, where you don't have the outsole, and I wouldn't do anything more than what you would do in a pair of like slippers in these. But they're very affordable. Footskins, it does technically hit that really affordable price point, and you're gonna get a lot of the feel of a moccasin boot, but you're missing a lot of the magic of it by getting the really affordable version, because you do have those holes punched at the top. It's kind of a cheap leather. It just doesn't have a lot of that, the magic, for lack of a better word. But if you want to try the moccasin thing and you don't want to spend 800, 900 bucks, this is actually a really good option to dip your toe in this world of moccasin boots. Then Gokey's an interesting one, because there's a lot of people that say, oh, it's cheaper than Russell's, it's worse. It's also half the price of Russell's. And because of that, you get a really, really good boot that will hunt just about as good as a pair of Russells. It's gonna be just about as durable as Russell's, just about as comfortable. To me, it's like 80% of what Russell's are at half the price. And there's gonna be a lot of guys out there that are like, I just need a safari boot, a few hikes here and there. I'm going on one hunt, or I need this specific boot for going on a safari. I don't wanna spend 900 bucks on a moccasin boot. I just wanna spend like 400 bucks. That's already expensive enough. And they do it really, really well for that price point. Good leathers, good construction, 150-year history. There's a few issues on the inside that, you know, maybe is a QC issue that you could sort out with them. But for the most part, I'm almost like reconsidering my value proposition for these, because these are a really good value. But that's why Gokey's still around, is they make a really good boot for a really good price, and they have the lineage and the history to back it up. And so ultimately, like if you don't have the money for these top dogs, this is a really good way to get a really good boot for a lot cheaper. And then Rancourts have found this spot in the industry doing the loafers, doing like the more slim silhouettes, the really refined designs, the true old school Maine moccasin. And a lot of people will say, like, if you're gonna buy a true Maine moccasin, you have to go with Rancourt. They're the best in the industry. If you want the loafer style, you gotta go with Rancourt. That's even reflected in their boots. Like this is basically just a high top loafer. They're built the exact same way, they feel the same, their intended purposes are very similar. They just do it better than anyone else in this loafer style that I've seen. Then to Easy Moc, I love this brand because everything is so unique. Everything is so different compared to all the other brands. They really push the limits on their designs, the materials they use, and they're really, really thoughtful in how they make things. The brand, the owner is really cool and very passionate about the project, and all these brands are that way. You don't get into making moccasin boots to make money. You get into it because it's a passion. You want to keep this thing alive. You want to make this old school, unique style of construction, and that's exactly what Easy Moc is. They're a small brand making small batches of really unique stuff that nobody else makes. And all the way from these really expensive, really heavy duty boots down to those little Easy Mocs and that really simple moccasin I absolutely love. They just do things different than these old school brands, because Easy Moc's new. They're fairly new in the industry compared to 150-year-old Gokey and like 100-year-old Russell. And then Russell's, pretty self-explanatory. You probably heard me talk about Russell's plenty. They are the top outdoor moccasin. There's nobody that does it better. There's no one that makes a higher quality, longer lasting, more durable, more comfortable, fully packed with all the right components, all the true moccasin things, plus elevated above with all the stuff we talked about with the overlap stitch, the silicone infused linings, and they have a full fleet of boots that are willing to take on just about anything. You know, like, you compare that to Easy Moc. Easy Moc has all those different styles that are a lot more casual, a lot more lightweight, a lot more easy, where these are all dedicated boots. These are true moccasin boots. And now we can pretty well prove it. None of these other brands even get close to making a boot that's quite as ready for the outdoors. And they have models anywhere from their PH that's still a good hunting boot, but a lot more flexible, or they're more rigid backcountry, or even like the really, really heavy duty boots. They just occupy that really rugged, heavy duty end of the spectrum for moccasin boots, and nobody even gets close. Finally, to Yucatan. Even though you could say it's the worst value, they're some of the coolest moccasins in the entire world. These guys are completely obsessed with quality. Everything they do, from stitch to materials to construction styles, it's just completely over the top in obsession. Not just in the design and how they add like modern flair to an old school style, but this leather's 3 millimeters thick. Like if you look at the inside, it's completely packed with like veg tan this. So you get even like, no one would ever see this. This is hidden inside of the boot, and it's Yucatan leather tuck. No one ever will see that except for me. And like they add that little detail in there. Same thing with this little arch support. You don't have to add that in there. Nobody's gonna be like, oh, there's just one little support right there. But they're doing every conceivable thing to make these boots as perfect as humanly possible for this side of the industry. You know, you compare them to the Russells and you're like, yo, these are way worse than Russells, or this, and this. They're completely different boots, two completely different brands. And that's why I wanted to do this as a longer video, because to really appreciate some of these brands' differences, you have to see the whole industry and see what the differences are and how they lie on that spectrum from like really casual to really heavy use. And that's why these are $990. They're trying to make the absolute highest quality and boundary pushing moccasins that anyone makes. And that's exactly what they are. They're so over the top, they're so beautiful, they're so perfectly done in every single area. You just can't get that same level of precision and craftsmanship from a more utility-based boot. And that's even echoed with the Easy Mocs. It's, you know, they're all top quality, but top quality in different ways. And so that is everything you should need to know about the true Matusa Mocs, the made in the United States Mocs. All these brands are remnants of a dying breed. These are the brands that withstood all the ups and downs of economics, of styles, of trends, of acquisitions and Great Depression, Industrial Revolution. Some of these brands have been around for over 150 years. And the fact that there's still multiple brands making these at the absolute top quality and people are still willing to support them is one of the coolest things in the entire footwear industry. These select like 10 brands are the last remnants, the last stand of true moccasin boots. I'm literally getting cold chills talking about it. So check these guys out, support them all. They're all really cool brands. They're all super passionate about what they're doing. Like I said, they don't get into this to make money. They get into this because it's a passion. They want to make this specific style of boot because of the history, because of the values, and that is worth supporting. So check all these out below. I'll also link all the other videos we did of these, individually cutting them in half, and let me know what you would rank them, because I guarantee everyone's rankings are gonna be completely different from mine. I mean, whether it's the value or the strengths and weaknesses of the brand, the overall best, they're all gonna completely vary, and that's what's cool about this. So thank you guys for watching and sticking around for this very long video. Shout out to the editor that has to edit this video, my bad. But this is the ultimate guide to moccasin boots, and thank you guys for your support through this Mocktober. It's one of my most favorite series to do, and this was a special one. This was a really, really cool one. So thank you guys. See ya. Where am I at? Who am I? Dear Lord, did I push record? Okay, good. So many names to remember.